A pleasure to meet y'all at last, and welcome back to Survival of No Limits. For the last time, right now. Because, well, I've said it before and I'm going to say it again. I will be heading back inside this very house after this is all done. Because it's been 7 days worth of episodes here, a full week. But typically speaking, I tend to spend 14 days getting 7 different episodes together and onto the channel before moving on to a new location, pretty much. And that's kind of how the process has been going for a while now. And it probably will be that way for the rest of the time that Survival of No Limits is in existence, on the channel or otherwise. So that's pretty much how the whole entire thing is going to be going for sure. But what I got to say right now is that there really is something else that I might as well get down to right away. Because today's episode is number 27. Yep. The last one for this particular week of episodes here. 2 weeks, to be more specific here. But volcanic eruptions are what's next. So, I'm pretty excited for this one because right now, there have been a lot of cases that have involved volcanic eruptions. Specifically those that have been happening around the world. But, if there's one type of volcano that we've known for a long time here in America itself, at least the mainland of America, including Washington, California, Maine, New York, Florida, Virginia, Dakota, and Montana, then if there's one volcano that I can pretty much identify all the time, then it would be Mount St. Helens, up there near the Pacific Northwest in Washington. Famous for its eruption in May of 1980. That was over 40 years ago. And I feel like the timing is pretty much perfect, but it probably could have happened a little bit earlier. Let's say on its 40th anniversary, but otherwise, that event itself was a pretty big thing that ever happened in American history. Aside from many other things that have happened during the 70s and 80s, America itself had a lot of things going on. But Mount St. Helens pretty much changed everything when it came to observing natural history of all sorts that ever happened within America's soil itself. Mount St. Helens was in fact a gigantic place in the state of Washington. And it was in fact one of the most devastating events that ever occurred in 1980 as a whole. Aside from a few other things that might have also happened, Mount St. Helens was truly one of the most devastating volcanoes that might have ever happened to erupt in America itself. But then of course there comes the many volcanoes that exist in Hawaii, mainly Kilauea, Mauna Loa, and many others here and there. Hawaii tends to be a rich gold mine of volcanoes and other assorted mountains that happen to spew out lava, magma, pahoehoe, and other assorted things out there. So the thing is that Hawaii is pretty much the only other place that exists within America itself that happens to have volcanoes as a whole, and more than just one, to be more specific. Otherwise, volcanoes tend to be more prominent around the world, mainly in places like Africa, Europe, Asia, and Oceania, which is where Australia and New Zealand are, just to name a few that are in that area in the world. And there are in fact many other famous cases out there, including the eruption of Vesuvius in Pompeii, which was in fact a province in the Bay of Naples in Italy back in 79 AD. And that was not even 2,000 years ago, in contrast to 41, which is how long ago Mount St. Helens had erupted. Vesuvius, however, was a much more prominent role in history relating to geology and volcanic activities that have occurred throughout our own history. It was, in fact, one of the most popular that you might have ever known throughout any point in time, because it hasn't even been 2,000 years since it erupted, but we are getting pretty close. We still have at least 58 years to go before that even happens, but until then, you might as well just say that Vesuvius was in fact one of the most dangerous, lethal, and, well, devastating type of volcanoes ever to exist. Because how can you imagine one volcano taking away an entire town from existence? Pompeii, of course, was buried underneath tons of rock, molten lava, and ash that it almost was never existent. That is until the next several centuries and millennia later, where we would eventually start figuring out that there was in fact a city underneath the current soil that was above. Pompeii, of course, was very much forgotten, pretty much. For centuries upon centuries, up until a certain point during the 14th and 16th centuries, was when we started uncovering pieces of the city itself. Of course, we have ourselves today's sort of experiments and today's sort of methods of how we can extract Pompeii out from all that ash and rock, but back then it was kind of hard to do. Thankfully, with a lot of technological advancements and otherwise, we were able to simply dig up certain parts of the ash and molten rock and the like, and there have been cavities, as they're called, that housed many different skeletons of bodies of victims that have been apparent throughout the time of the eruption in 79 AD, that all we had to do was pour in plaster of Paris, which allowed to dry up around the skeletons and form a near perfect body of what used to be the victim before dying back then at that time. Of course, it wasn't always possible to do so, but museums nowadays still do have a lot of artifacts relating to the Vesuvius eruption in 79 AD. Lots of them. And that's quite a lot that you can get from just one simple event that happened nearly 2,000 years ago. But otherwise, I could pretty much talk about all sorts of volcanoes and other mountains here and there, like Fuji, Pinatubo, the Philippines volcano in 1991, and many, many others here and there. But then, of course, there come the more recent eruptions. If there's one that I should highlight, though, that really did change a lot of history for all of us, and it wasn't that old at all, it would probably be Krakatoa. 1883 was when Krakatoa made the loudest possible eruption that had ever been experienced by humans. It was also the loudest possible sound that could have ever been recorded by humans in any way. And being that this was in 1883, a time where technology wasn't necessarily the best that we could have ever gotten a hold of, that's really saying a lot. Of course, this sound is still around. There's actually a clip on YouTube where you can go listen to the sound if you want to. But bear in mind, the sound that it made at the time in 1883 was over 170 decibels, much higher than that of most sounds that we generally hear that are already way too loud for our eardrums to handle, including jackhammers and jetliners. So, you might want to brace yourself when the sound actually comes on, because it's very sudden and instant. I almost got jump scared just trying to listen to that thing. With 1883 style audio clarity, that really was just incredible how they were able to capture the sound of the volcano erupting at the time. But, like I said, I could spend some time digging up all sorts of info, talking a lot about it, but it was still pretty good to talk a little bit about Vesuvius, Pinatubo, the Philippines-related volcanic eruption in 1991. Then we have Krakatoa in Mount St. Helens, and many others here and there that probably would have been so much for me to talk about that I just probably couldn't keep up with so much of it. But anyways, that's pretty much going to do it for right now. But like I said, there's still much more to come on Survival of No Limits, yet the location's going to change yet again, so expect that to happen pretty soon. But until then, if you want to see more go down on my channel, make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side.